Hey, what is up guys, this is a video on my X99 build. I currently have an X77 build, which has the 370-70K in, but I decided to go out and get myself a 5960, which is complete overkill for gaming really, but for multiple programs, gaming, streaming, recording, whatever else you're doing, it's going to do pretty good, and you're going to be able to do multiple things at once. First up with the processor, I have the Asus Rampage 5 Extreme. Being a fan of the Asus boards and the ROG style suits my current setup, which is the black and red theme. The previous boards I've had have been pretty stable when it comes to overclocking and always reliable. It also includes the OC panel, which I've yet to use, but it's an added bonus which I may use. For anyone that may or may not be bothered by the ROG looks, you can go something like the Asus Deluxe boards, which pretty much offer you the same reliability and the components on the board without the OC panel and somewhere in the region of £50 less retail. Next up is the RAM. Needing DDR4, I went with the Kingston Hyperx Predator 3000 MHz 60GB kits. That's the 4 modules, 4GB kit. Maybe later I go for the 32GB, but for the time being I'll stay 16GB. As the 32GB kits right now are hugely expensive, being DDR4. I'll probably look into it later. I mean, these ones right now probably don't provide the tightest of timings, but I'll see how it goes first, see if it's worthwhile investment first. And yeah, that'll do for RAM anyway. For all this computing power, the high TDP, and also me playing on overclocking, I need a good CPU cooler. I decided to buy a new closed loop water cooler. I decided to go against my trend of getting Corsair ones, so I went with the Kraken X61. Uses bigger fans, that being the 140mm fans instead of the 120 Corsair currently do, I believe. And yeah, hopefully the bigger surface area will help. I also want to see if there is actually a big deal difference between them. I mean, generally speaking, I don't think there is. Closed loop systems are going to have only a certain amount of effectiveness on obviously the surface area and the pump included. I would go something like obviously a decent water cooling system loop later on, but right now it's got to do. Next up is the power. I went with the Superflower Leadex Platinum 1200 watt fully modular power supply. This has a single 12 volt rail, and well, it's a power supply. I don't know what else to say except for it should be plenty powerful for my setup. It's efficient, has the same features most other power supplies at this point, which is like obviously the fan not spinning up when you're on about 50% loads. So yeah, less unnecessary noise when I'm idling or watching stuff on, I don't know, YouTube, I guess, you know, anything like that. So yeah, that's the power supply. Last thing before getting on with the build, I needed more data. I have some SSDs currently in the system when I think it was like £2 per gigabyte, so it was a very hefty price. Now they've gone down in price, I decided to get a reasonable sized hard drive, so I went with the Samsung 840 EVO 1TB. It's a reasonable SSD, has decent reads and writes, it should do me fine for any recordings I do, games, any other stuff that I'll hold in there. I generally like just using SSDs at this point because obviously they're just the response times on SSDs, you don't get any hard drive noise, you know, so you know, it's stuff like that I sometimes notice, so SSDs are perfect for me. And yeah, that's everything. Now onto the build, I suppose. So here's the current setup at the moment with all the power cables and everything else moved out of the way. It's housed in the Corsair 540 Carbide. I run the whole front setup of 120mm fans, so that's the 3 right at the front there. We then have the rear fan at the moment, and then H100, which is not currently running the push and pull system because I've already taken some of those fans out. In the case we have the Intel 3770K, which is running at 4.4 GHz, and a 16GB of Corsair Vengeance RAM at 2400 MHz. We then have 2 Asus DirectCUII 2 cards, that's a 780s running SLI. And then for a sound card for the moment, the Asus Xonar Phoebus. Yeah, so that's everything more or less. Now to take out everything and get going, I suppose. Now a quick reminder before you start working on any PC components as such is to work on an anti-static mat. This stops obviously any static shocks coming through any of the components, and also I am wearing an anti-static band on my ankle. I have it mainly on my ankle because it's out of the way, it doesn't affect you when you're working in such tight spaces. So out of the box is this lovely motherboard, which was tightly packed in, as I found out. Once out, I laid the motherboard on the mat and just had a look at it. First thing I noticed was the amount of SATA ports on the X99 board compared to the X77. In this case 12 in fact, then you have 2 SATA Express ports. This also has 10 USB 3.0 ports and 2 2.0 ports. That's quite a lot of USB ports. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to fill them all up, but you know, that'll do. Anyway, next on to showing how to put your CPU in. One thing I noticed when installing the CPU, the writing is in fact upside down compared to the motherboard, which nearly caught me out. In fact, I was about to put it in and realised, looking out for this triangle. The triangle is really important that you make sure you get that right with the board, because it does not fit any other way except for that way. Once placed in, you start clipping the CPU down. You do the right mechanism first and then the left hand one. And that's it basically. You've installed your CPU. It can't be much simpler than that, just making sure you get that triangle the right way around. RAM is next. Ideally you install these in the recommended coloured ports on the motherboard. I didn't know at the time which ones they were, so I went with whatever was there basically. When it comes to putting these only go in one way. You need to make sure the notch where the contacts are in the right place on the board. They're offset slightly, so they're not centre, so you cannot put them in the wrong way. And then all you do is simply move away the top clip and push them in firmly. This should then let the clip lock it back into place against the RAM. Yeah, for me, I just stuck them in the same coloured slots to start off with. I think I did end up changing them later on in the build. Right, before moving on to putting the motherboard in, let's move on to the case. First off is to put the IO shield in and ensure you have it the right way around. General rule of thumb is the audio ports go at the bottom. If not, just double check by lining up with the motherboard you got out already. Push in the IO shield firmly until it sits flush. Simple as that, you've done that bit already. Next thing I would make sure of is that standoffs that the motherboard screws into are actually in the correct places. As this is the same motherboards that what I've already got, they're all the same. I don't need to worry about that, but just double check with your case to make sure they're there. If not, you should have them included somewhere in a bag with your case. With this case, it has a locator for the center screw, so when I put the motherboard in, it's in position, ready for it to be screwed in. When screwing this board in, you only need to pinch tight them. You don't need to overly screw them, because you will try and stress the motherboard if you do so. All you need is it so it holds in, and that's you done. That's your motherboard already in this case. Done. Boom. How do you feel now? Now I'm going to admit straight away that I did this slightly wrong. I installed the X61 Watercooler next, but I forgot to add the top power supplies to the top left of the motherboard. The issue is once the Watercooler goes in, there's very little room to plug these in, which as a result made it quite awkward for me later on. So how I decided to put the cooler in is I put the fans first and then obviously the radiator. This is to pull air through, which comes the reason why I did that was to clean dust out of the radiator is a lot easier when you have them in push, and then obviously I can clean the fans from the other side, so generally it's a better way of cleaning the thing out. It's a bit tricky screwing the fans in this way, as you've got obviously go through the fan first then to the radiator, but when you do this I suggest you do what I didn't do, which is I did it from the centre outwards. You should always do them from the corners first inwards and towards the centre of the radiator. Makes the thing a hell of a lot easier and you don't end up messing around like I did for gosh how long. Now for the integrated pump and the copper block that goes onto your CPU. You have to screw the standoffs in first into the standard setup for this. There's no need for a back plate, as the motherboard already has a back plate. You don't need to have any special one included out of the box. Once the standoffs are screwed in, you can place the block and the pump onto the CPU. There's already thermal compound pre-applied on the block, so you don't need to worry about that. get the required fixings that are provided also, and clamp down the block in an even pattern, going in diagonals, so you screw the block down evenly. You have certain cables that will need to be connected later on, so there'll be like a SATA power cable, you got a USB motherboard plug to access that's for the software to access the pump speed, the fan speeds if you decide to do it that way, and also the fan connector plugs for that, which, like I say, could be run through the software, or alternatively you could plug these via the motherboard via the 3 or 4 pin fan connectors. Moving on quickly, I plugged everything in to see if it would post at all, and voila, it did. So I quickly dived into the BIOS settings, just had a look at the layout first, of which most of it hasn't changed, I'm glad to say. One thing you must manually do with the RAM, at least for me, was to set it manually yourself. For whatever reason, it's like OC setting they'll class as. So yeah, I left everything else alone because I hadn't actually booted it up. Yeah, I hadn't got the hard drive plugged in to like Windows 8 so it could boot up. But yeah, idle temperatures look pretty good straight out of the bat, so that wasn't too bad. Only thing now is to really save the changes and actually see if it will post when boot, sorry, when everything else is plugged in. Brilliant. So I plugged everything else back in that was needed for the test boot up as such. This time I tried it with Windows 8 and it booted fine and seemed to be fine, obviously booted up for a while. So I've obviously came back in to put the last graphics card in. Thought I would at least show you guys that because a lot of people may or may not know. For this, use the red PCI Express slots for this, and it's a simple case of just pushing the card into the right slot, which, like I say, is the red ones in these case, until you hear the tiny click, which is like the slight lock-in mechanism it has, and once it's in from that click, you screw it to obviously the case, and then obviously get some power cables for it. In this case, this one needs an 8 pin and a 6 pin connector, otherwise it won't work. It will just obviously tell you haven't plugged these in yet. For the cables at the moment it's a bit of a mess because I was just obviously rushing to quickly get it all built, make sure it's all fine. I tend to do the cable management after I know everything's stable and booted up fine, and yeah, that's that. So this is it all put back together again, plugged in, AD strips ready to go because I got one top and bottom, X61 software installed for the red LED instead of the purple pinkish one it came out of the box like. Yeah, that's it for the moment, guys. I would like to say thanks for watching. All the specs will be in the description below. Leave a like, dislike, tell me why you did either. Hey, maybe tell me I should do more of these if not. And, you know, maybe subscribe if you want to see more. I do a bit more games and whatever else hopefully with this rig now. And till next time, see you guys later.